Hi everyone, in this video we'll be taking a close look at 3D printing, prototyping and makerspaces. Let's get into it. Now you've probably already heard about 3D printing, but is it something that's useful for businesses to get into? Is it something that hobbyists can use? Is it expensive? Is it technical? We'll jump into all of that in this video today. Now, 3D printing is one of my favorite hobbies. It's something that I'm really excited and passionate about. And I think one of the most special things about it right now is that it's one of those brand new technologies that is actually coming down in price and is really accessible to hobbyists. So let's go and have a closer look at some 3D printers. So I'm in my office now with my 3D printer farm just behind me, and I absolutely love having these machines. So you can see them working away, and the way that they work is they put down very fine layers and they build up these layers out of melted plastic to make your final object. Inside the extruder assembly there, they have a heater that can heat up the plastic that's taken in from the spool up there, sucks down in there, and it heats it up to about 200 degrees and then melts it down and puts it down on those layers, and it pretty much solidifies instantly to build up these layers. So it's ready to go straight off the bed when the machine is finished. One of the most popular questions I get asked is it expensive to get started with 3D printing? And while the stuff that I've got behind me is a bit more high-end, it isn't for a start-out hobbyist. So material costs, to buy a standard kilo spool roll like you can see behind me here, one of those is about $25. So that is super economical. So to start prototyping and making some stuff like this, 3D printed casts for broken bones, for example, one of these probably costs me maybe $1.50 to make. And that means that you can continue to prototype and continue to iterate and improve your designs because of that low cost of materials. You can also pick up some pretty fantastic deals on 3D printers now. Since 3D printing began, I feel like now is probably one of the best times to buy a machine, because some of the cheaper machines now are absolutely fantastic. Some of the best machines that I've seen so far in the user entry market sit between $400 to $800, and I really like the Creality brand for this. They're some of the easiest to use and maintain machines that I've seen in a long time. And what's fantastic about it is, as you sort of go along and you need to buy spare parts, usually the spare parts won't cost you much at all. So they're great machines that'll just keep going and going and going. The machines that I have behind me are Lulzbot brand, and I really like these ones because they're an open source company, which means that I can go and pick out any of the parts on the machine that I might need to make copies of and print them myself. They're also a fantastic model for doing more work with exotic type filaments like flexible materials, wood fill, bronze fill, all that kind of more tricky stuff to print that might not work on standard machines. But I really believe that you don't need to be a scientist or an engineer to get started with 3D printing. You can just be anyone who's gone out and bought themselves a printer, and you can get started on making a real difference in terms of what's out there. Like, everything hasn't been invented, everything hasn't been done. There's so much space there to be creative with what you're making. So if you're interested in a particular niche, there's something that really excites you, and you go in there and you get yourself a 3D printer and you start prototyping and start solving problems for people, you upload those models online, and suddenly everyone else doesn't have that problem. Suddenly people can use that design and go and take it and turn it into something new. And you have like a snowball effect where people can just get inspired by something that you might have started in the beginning. And I've really experienced this effect with a project that I did, which is this one here, 3D printed casts for broken bones. This is one of my favorite projects, and this is one that I did for my local base hospital as a demonstrating sort of type project. And the way that I did this was I 3D scanned my own arm, and I designed this one to fit me exactly, which is pretty cool. And since doing this project, I made it an open source project. So now anyone who has a 3D printer, has a 3D scanner, can go and make their own versions of these and improve upon them, and maybe we might start seeing them quicker in our own healthcare systems. Another great example of using 3D printing for business might be making cheaper plastic alternatives for things that might otherwise be too expensive for customers to get hold of. One of my favorite examples of this idea is from a project making prosthetics with my local hand therapy unit. So there's been a few clients that have been missing fingers, and we can make prosthetic fingers that bend and move using 3D printing. So the way that this works is you've got a string and a stick and a couple of elastic bands inside this finger, so that when you attach this stick to a wristband, when you move your wrist back and forth, the finger goes to grab. And so I got to give one of these to a patient last year, and it was a fantastic moment, because he was telling me that after he lost his finger, he started to go and get quotes from really high-end prosthetics companies, and he found that it was going to cost him between $50,000 and $80,000 to get a similar prosthetic made up from a high-end company. And so something like this cost me about $5 to make. So we can really start iterating and improving things faster and making things cheaper and more budget for those customers who need it. Another great example is vintage car parts as well. There's a huge market for things that aren't made anymore, which 3D printers can tap into. Another one of my favourite projects with 3D printing has been designing 3D printable furniture that is functional and usable for at home. So this is a small example, but I'm actually sitting on the big version. Let's have a look. Here it is. So the way that I made this was I 3D printed out all the connectors, and I used timber dowel to put the whole thing together. So the thing that excites me about this project anyway is the idea of making a decentralized economy. So the idea is that, for example, you might be able to go to your local furniture shop, and they might have some big screens there and just a big 3D printer sitting on the floor. And you might be able to go in there and go, I want this stool. And so it goes and 3D prints out the stool for you straight away. And you take it all at home and you put it together, and then 10 years down the track, when you don't like it anymore, or it's broken or something like that, you can take it back and it gets recycled and turned into something new. So the cool thing about this idea is that you're not paying any excess shipping costs from shipping things from some kind of mass manufacturer overseas over to Australia. The store doesn't have any excess stock that it needs to get rid of at the end of every cycle. It's not wasteful. You're making these high quality products locally through the local manufacturing chains. Another good example of this is the face shields project for protecting healthcare workers from COVID-19. So I've already spoken about this in detail in another video, which you can go and check out in the links below. But this is another great example of that same concept. While supply chains are choked and there's a PPE shortage, we can start to make this type of equipment ourselves locally and respond to that local demand as it's needed with our local 3D printing community. So super exciting stuff. And so if you do want to start your own hardware prototyping idea or company, you don't actually need to have a 3D printer either if you don't quite want to get one straight away. There's another fantastic option out there called going and visiting your local makerspace or your local hackerspace. Now these are spaces where you can go, and it operates a bit like a gym, where you pay a membership fee and you can go and access a whole range of different tools and options and things that you might only want to use once. But instead of just buying a whole machine or a whole tool of that particular kind, you can just go in there and use that thing once, get trained on it, learn how to use it, and experience the benefit of using those bits of equipment. So one of the biggest hackerspaces in Queensland is the Brisbane Hackerspace. It's in fact the largest one in Australia, and it's open 24 hours a day for members. You can go in there and do stuff for 3D printing, laser cutting, electronics, woodworking, metalworking, welding, and blacksmithing. A whole range of options there to go and check out. You might also find makerspaces in your local libraries, in your local schools, community groups. A whole range of different areas might have access to this type of equipment that you might be able to tap into. If you don't have one in your local area, consider starting one. They're a great asset to the community, and it means that a whole bunch of people can do a whole bunch more that they wouldn't otherwise be able to. Experts are saying that having a 3D printer at home is going to be about as common as having a sewing machine at home. And having my two machines here with me has been a fantastic outlet for creativity, for problem solving, and doing all kinds of cool projects. And I absolutely love having a 3D printer that I can use. So thanks so much for watching this video on 3D printing and makerspaces. You can go and check out some of the previous videos in this series looking at the lean startup methodology, the Australian entrepreneurship ecosystem, how to build a website, and more. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.